The presence of microplastics in marine environments has become a growing global concern due to their possible environmental and ecological impacts. So, what is microplastic? Plastic particles smaller than 5 millimeters in size. They are either produced or formed from the breakdown of larger plastics due to environmental factors like sunlight. Pulau Ketam in Kuala Perlis, which are important places for tourism, fisheries industries, source of seafood for consumers, such as human exposure to microplastics and other human activities. This occurred because humans' lack of information towards contamination levels, sources, and impacts that would affect the area. By analyzing sediment samples under a microscope, the researcher aims to observe the abundance and identify the characteristics of microplastics, such as their size and the type of microplastics. And as for the hypothesis, if the area have high levels of microplastic contamination, then the area is likely exposed to human activities, such as fishing, agricultural and coastal activities, which harm marine ecosystems and local communities. In recent years, researchers have increasingly focused on advancements in science, particularly in the field of microplastics. In 2022, Arthur had done a research where he examines the persistence of microplastics in the environment and their potential toxicity to human health and ecosystems. Mikulski reported that microplastics have been found to penetrate living organisms primarily through the consumption of contaminated fish and shellfish. Furthermore, they have been detected in various everyday items such as cigarettes, as well as in critical resources including water and soil. Similarly to Wong, observed that microplastics abundance in sediment samples across Southeast Asia fluctuates between wet and dry seasons. These fluctuations were attributed to environmental factors, including changes in rainfall patterns and surface runoff. However, discrepancies in data remain a challenge, primarily due to variations in identification and quantification methods used across studies by Castaneda in 2022.
I'm Atira. Today I will be presenting the methodology used in our study, which examines microplastic contamination in surface sediments at Kampung Seberang Alur, Kuala Perlis near Pulau Ketam. So the first one, which is sampling location, our samples were collected from 3 different sites, which is labeled as S1, S2 and S3. So each site was placed at slightly different distances from each other for a comprehensive assessment. So the sediments were collected using shovels and tin containers, and also we avoid any plastics materials, which were cleaned thoroughly with deionized water prior to use. After collection, the containers were sealed with aluminium foil to prevent any airborne contamination, and also were transported securely to the lab for further analysis. Next, for sample preparation, at the lab, the sediment samples were carefully transferred to the beaker to ensure uniform distribution. To prevent contamination, the beaker were covered with aluminium foil. So these beakers were placed after that in an oven set at 90 degrees Celsius and left for 24 hours to dry the samples completely. Once dried, the sediments were prepared for microplastic extraction through a process called density separation. Next, for density separations, in this step, the dried sediment samples were first sieved to the isolate particles smaller than 5 mm. A sodium chloride NaCl solution was prepared by dissolving NaCl into distilled water. So this solution was then mixed with the sieved sediments in a beaker. After stirring the mixture for 2 minutes, the beaker was covered with aluminium foil to avoid again contamination and left undisturbed for 24 hours. Over this time, microplastic, which are less than the NaCl solution, floated to the surface, separating them from heavier particles. We will proceed with chemical digestions. So, to remove any organic matter, the separated sediments underwent chemical digestions using hydrogen peroxide, which is H2O2. So, this oxidizing agent effectively breaks down organic material into water and also carbon dioxide, while keeping microplastic intact. This will ensure that the microplastic can be analyzed without interference from organic debris. After that, we use microscopic analysis. The extracted microplastic were then observed under a dissecting microscope at magnifications range from 4x to 40x. This microscopic provided a clear three-dimensional view of the microplastic. Particles were after that identified based on their physical characteristics such as shape, whether they were fibers, fragments, or filaments, and then their colors. Each particles were manually counted and categorized into its respective type. Representative image of the microplastic were also captured for documentations.
Let's take a closer look at the findings of our study. First, for the abundance of microplastic, we observed that sediment samples from site S1, S2, and S3 contain microplastic across different sieve levels, including the middle and bottom layers. The microplastic found were mainly sheets, fibers, and films. Now, moving on to the types and sources of microplastic. Sheet result from the degradation of larger plastic items such as bottles and containers caused by weathering, UV radiation, and mechanical aberration. Next is the fibers are released from the synthetic clothing during laundry, industrial processes, or from materials like carpet and upholstery. They are commonly found in water, air, and soil. Moreover, films come from sources like plastic bag, food packaging, shrink wraps, and agricultural mulching films. These are often found in the agricultural soils and urban environments. Okay, now let's look at the site 3, S3, which recorded the highest concentration of microplastic predominantly in the form of sheets. Why is this happening? Our findings indicate that human activities play a major role in this pollution. Specifically, site S3 is located near the food court, playground, and the jetty. The areas that naturally generate higher amounts of waste. Next is the tourism activities further increase of waste disposal, especially as more people visit this popular location. Additionally, ferries transporting people and vehicles to the Langkawi Island contribute to the waste load in the area. These factors create a hotspot for the microplastic accumulation, emphasizing the direct impact of the human behavior on our environment. Addressing these issues requires immediate action to manage and reduce this pollution.
Assalamualaikum everyone, welcome to this presentation on microplastic pollution and its impact on our ecosystem. In this study, we have explored the abundance, characteristics, distribution patterns, and environmental implications of microplastics in sediment from 3 samples. Let's dive into the findings. We examined the characteristics of the microplastics in our samples. Previous research suggested there are 6 types of microplastics in sediment, but in our study, we identified only 3, sheets, fibers, and films. Among these, sheets and films were the most prevalent. Sheets often come from larger plastic debris, while films are associated with packaging materials like plastic bags and shrink wraps. Fibers, through present, were less common, accounting for only 16.74 totals of microplastic found. We examine how microplastic are distributed across sediment layers, with a focus on their size and density. We use 2 sieves to separate the microplastic, which is middle sieve and bottom sieve. In the middle sieve, which size 1 mm to 5 mm, we found lighter particles like films and fibers. These smaller, less dense microplastics are more easily carried by wind or water, which means they often settle in the top layers of sediment. In the bottom sieve, which size 0.355 mm to 1 mm, we found denser particles like sheets, which tend to sink deeper into the sediment layers. Interestingly, fibers, though less common overall, were also found more frequently in the bottom sieve than the middle sieve. These size differences play a key role in how microplastics move and settle in the environment. Lighter particles stay closer to the surface, while heavier particles sink deeper, which can affect marine ecosystems differently depending on where these particles accumulate. Microplastic pollution poses significant risk to the environment. These particles can disrupt ecosystem and harm wildlife. Ingesting microplastics can lead to physical damage, toxicity, and can even enter the food chain, affecting organisms at all levels. For example, marine organisms may consume microplastics either directly or through their prey. This can lead to reduced feeding, stunted growth, and lower reproductive success. Over time, this pollution affects the entire food web, threatening marine life. In a nutshell, the widespread presence of microplastics in sediment, especially in areas impacted by human activities, underscores the urgent need to address plastic pollution. Effective waste management, reducing plastic use, and raising public awareness are crucial steps in mitigating the impact of microplastics on our ecosystems. Together, we can make a difference in reducing microplastic pollution and protecting our planet for future generations.
In conclusion, our study revealed that microplastics are widespread in the sediments of Kuala Perlis. Sheets, fiber, and film were the most commonly found types, reflecting diverse sources of the plastic pollution. Site S3 showed the highest microplastic concentration, likely due to the human activities like tourism and poor waste disposal. The distribution of microplastic was also influenced was their density, with heavier particles settling in the deeper sediment layers and lighter one remaining near to the surface. These findings highlight the serious environmental risks posed by the microplastic, including threats to the marine ecosystem, biodiversity, and the food chains. They emphasizes the urgent needs for the better waste management, public awareness campaign, and ongoing research to address microplastic pollution. Sustainable coastal management practices are essential to mitigate these effects and protect our marine environments. Thank you.